as an entrepreneur, you wake up and your schedule is effectively a blank slate. Like we make schedules, right? Like we have a calendar, I have a to-do list, but I could do anything at any given time of the day. So the question then becomes, how are you most productive? Down to the almost minute.
Are you a corporate escapee and wasting valuable time attempting to figure challenges out on your own? Well, this podcast is for you. We bring you firsthand experiences of guests going through many of the struggles you face each and every day. We get real with no corporate BS. And now, over to your host, Paul Higgins.
Hello and welcome to Corporate Escapees. Our guest today is someone who did law. Then he spent 10 months, as it is a requirement in Canada, to work with a law firm. And he realised then that it just wasn't going to be the right thing for him. So he seized an opportunity to work with a mentor and he created his own firm. And he's had amazing success. One of the key reasons for that is he picked a high tide, and that was tech within Canada. Also, he has a side hustle called Soloprenuer Grind, and he talked about how he runs that with his day job. If you're a solopreneur and you really don't want to miss out on this show. So now I'll hand you over to Josh Schachnow from Soloprenuer Grind. So welcome Josh Schachnow to the Corporate Escapees podcast, brought to you by Build, Live, Give. So welcome, Josh.
Paul, it's a pleasure. Thanks for having me on.
Great. Well, look, I know I've been on your fantastic podcast, Soloprenuer Grind, and it was an absolute pleasure. So I'm very happy to have you back here. But why don't we just start with something your family or friends would know about you that we wouldn't?
Yeah, I thought long and hard about this one because I do love your podcast. Been really looking forward to coming on. And I'd say that I'm actually very shy and introverted. And the reason why I say that is because my followers and maybe listeners will see most of my content, which is YouTube. Yeah, I like audio and visual. And so you're seeing me talk all the time. But in real life, I'm definitely more of an introvert. I love my alone time. And at a party, I'm definitely not the life of the party. So that's what I got.
Excellent. And how did you go with that transition of being so public with your fantastic podcast versus what you do in your private life?
Yeah, that's a good question. I actually think I'm still going through that transition a little bit. And you kind of hit a certain point where I think it has to do with age as well. I'm 28 years old. And even just in the last, 5 to 8 years, I've just come out of my shell a little bit more. You go through more of life, you go through more accomplishments, and that confidence kind of just builds up in you. And you start learning and you start doing, and you have more things to say and ideas to share. And that's how you create value, right? So I love the podcast. It's an easy way, as you know, to connect with great people, have great conversations, and share them with others. So if you kind of look at it that way, you're providing value, you're sharing wisdom, then that's an easy way, especially if you're on the shyer end and you don't think you have much to say. Everyone has something to say. It's just a matter of, building up the confidence and experience to get it out of you.
Yeah, and look, I completely agree. And if you're listening right now and you're debating whether to do a podcast, just do it. It's it's amazing, and I can't believe how my first podcast, just how I fumbled all over my words and I couldn't articulate myself well. Versus now, I think just with time you get better and better at it. So if you're thinking, just go and do. So I know, Josh, you have had a great career. I know you're only 28, so it's still blossoming, but why don't you just take us through a bit of your corporate escapee story?
Yeah, so I am a lawyer by day. I did my undergraduate degree here in Canada in business. I always loved business. I still do love business, but I always wanted to be a lawyer. I went to law school right after business school, and then I did the thing that everyone actually in Canada is required to do, which is work for another law firm under a lawyer for 10 months here. It's called articling, and you have to do it to be, fully certified as a lawyer. And I learned a lot, and I didn't like working at a firm. It wasn't because of the firm. It was a really good firm, but I really quickly learned that I didn't like working for other people, especially in the legal profession, as I'm sure, I've listened to some other episodes with financial workers and stuff like that. When you're in professional services, the people at the top tend to be a little older, maybe not as electronically or technologically inclined. And I was, I'm an avid reader, so I'm learning about all these digital marketing things and softwares and optimization tools, none of which are being applied very well in law firms. So I found it to be very inefficient, and I didn't like working for other people. I find it very hard to go, above and beyond when you're making a paycheck that isn't changing. You're getting paid for a 9 to 5, and especially in the legal profession, you're very rarely working 9 to 5. So I finished those 10 months and took a break because I didn't know what I wanted to do, and was given a really cool opportunity to basically open my own law firm under the mentorship and guidance of a much older and experienced immigration lawyer. And that opportunity just kind of fell into my lap because I know his son very well. And the long story short there, that was about a year and a half ago. We've since built up this niche law firm in Canada, helping tech workers immigrate into Canada, which has been a booming industry. And I pretty much work for myself. He's more of a mentor, and I've built up, what I like to think is a pretty good client list and revenue stream. And that's kind of the corporate side. I don't know if you want me to dive into the kind of passion project side, which is the solopreneur stuff.
We'll definitely get to that. I just
Sounds good.
So for you with the transition, and it was awesome. Well, it sounds fantastic that you had a mentor, but was it easier or harder for you to make the transition?
It was easy and hard in two different ways. The reason why it was easy is because I think since birth, I was meant to be an entrepreneur. There's just some of us who that's just how we're going to operate at our best. I don't think I'm meant to work for other people. And so taking the reins, taking full responsibility, and knowing that I'm, the master of my own destiny came very naturally. Now, on the other end, you wake up in the morning on the Monday and you realize that, well, you don't have any staff, you don't have any money, you can't pay anyone else to do anything. So if you don't do it, nothing's going to get done. And very little clients and experience to my name. So you got to hit the ground running, you got to, pound the pavement, all those cliches. And if I didn't start marketing, networking, and stuff like that, then nothing got done. So it was very slow at the beginning. But over time, the hard work started to pay off slowly. You get your first client, you do some good work, you get a referral, you get a second client. The first client comes back for more, and the snowball slowly starts to accumulate. So hard in some ways, easy in others.
That's great articulation. And as far as the mentor, I know you had the mentor, but what else did you read, or what other resources helped you to build the business at the beginning?
Yeah, I'd say definitely a combination of probably three things. Number one, books. I've always read, with the exception of when I was in law school, because I had to read so much during the day that the last thing I wanted to do at night was open up another book. But other than those 3 years, I've always been reading a book at any one given time, not all throughout the day. I mean, usually at night, I'll put 20, 30 minutes, or on the weekend, a few hours to reading. So business books, autobiographies of entrepreneurs, stuff like that. Number two is podcasts. I have been a big fan of podcasts, especially in the last 2-3 years. I'm happy to go through a list of those, and I can, rattle off a few very influential books as well. And then the third thing is just blogs on the internet and YouTube videos, right? There's so much content out there. Yes, you have to sift through it a little bit, but Google does a good job of that for you. So blogs, YouTube channels, videos, there's so much information out there. It's crazy. If you want to learn something, then the only thing stopping you is yourself, I would say.
Yeah, I totally agree. And we'll definitely ask you about your podcast, et cetera, in the rapid section at the end. But I completely agree with YouTube. I think it's, just an amazing vehicle. And I suppose what I do is I listen to podcasts, watch YouTube for my community. So I try to reduce the amount of content they've got to pick from, try to narrow that down. So I'm sort of like the triage person, I suppose, at the front end, helping with that. But Yeah, look, it's a wonderful time to if you're thirst for knowledge, it's a brilliant time to be alive. So the next section we'll go into is the build section, which, we'll talk more about what you're up to today. So when someone asks you, Josh, what do you do? And I know you've got a day and a night question. So why don't you answer both? What do you do during the day and what do you do during the night?
Yeah, so primarily I'm a Canadian immigration lawyer. I help Canadian companies sponsor tech workers. I help tech workers come to and stay in Canada for as long as possible. And by night, essentially what happened is 6 months ago, I realized I have this passion for business and I'm working on my own business. And there's very little info out there in terms of documenting the journey, right? We see all the content about the millionaires and the successes and the yachts and the mansions, but you don't really see the day-to-day or the buildup of these overnight, millionaires that are 10 years in the making. So I started documenting not only what I was doing, but what other people were doing. I started my podcast where I talk to other entrepreneurs like yourself to see exactly how you did it, right? Like what's the story behind it? And then how could someone else replicate it? And I think I started that in August or September, and I'm up over 23 episodes now. I'm also doing a daily vlog and an email list where I just try to provide insight on what it's like building a business.
Brilliant. And, what are, after those 23 shows, what are if you had to give 3 common things that someone should focus on, what are those 3 key things?
That's a great question. I think number one, something that I've learned in the last kind of 6 months, coincidentally 6 months, is that the super rich and successful people aren't necessarily special people born to be millionaires, right? What they actually are people who worked really, really hard. So the thing that I notice amongst all of my guests and amongst the people I look up to and follow is that it takes a lot of hard work. There's no one path you can take, right? There's plenty of different paths. We've all taken different ones. Mm-hmm. The key is to work very hard at it. So that's number one. Number two is that sales at the beginning are very important, right? Just like with any business, if you don't have sales and revenue coming in, you're not going to last very long. You're going to lose your confidence, the motivation, and everything like that. And a lot of the guests that I have were very intelligent in the way that they approached sales combined with number one. So they came up with a good strategy. They defined a niche. They created an offer. And then they started banging on doors or, whatever it was, Facebook messaging, anything else, and worked hard at it. So going back to number one, that's kind of like the general theme, I would say. But everyone seemed to have a really good strategy towards, sales and growth. And number three, I might have to do like a summary episode because this is a really good question now that I've had a bunch of people on. Number three is actually, now that I think about it, everyone I've had is just a really great person, right? So what a lot of people think about when you think entrepreneur, business person, salesperson could be like a greedy kind of evil, you think big corporation and all that stuff. But especially, and my brand kind of focuses on solopreneurs, especially solopreneurs who are kind of their own shop, people like you who have a small team. Everyone became successful by being really great people, providing value, helping others, and having a positive attitude. And that's been really eye-opening and great to see, to be honest.
Yeah, and look, I must admit that's been my biggest learning out of corporate is, and corporate, I suppose there was sort of tend to be two people. I was a bit the same where, I try to help people in corporate all the time, but people were trying to get your job, people were trying to get the next job. Like it was really hard to trust and work. And, I found that really difficult, to be honest. But now it's so collegiate. Everyone tries to help everyone because everyone's got their very special niche. It's not, you're all trying to sort of help. And it's a bit like when, there was Apple users against IBM. I sort of find it a bit the same. There's sort of, the big corporate guys, and then there's us that are, trying to create value. And I find it really hugely collegiate, hugely collaborative. And that's what I love about being a solopreneur myself. And
Absolutely.
yeah, I think that's one of the joys of running your own business. And I'm so glad that you see that and you've experienced that. And I know that if you're listening and you're, in corporate and you're debating it, it's definitely got lots of value. And as far as for you, you've interviewed lots of people around that sales. What have been some of the themes around getting their first customer?
Yeah, one of the key themes seems to be provide value, right? So gone are the days where you just kind of throw up a shingle and people come in. Now more so than ever, there's a million, especially if you're going into like freelancing type stuff or solopreneurial type stuff, the digital marketers, the copywriters, stuff like that. So how do you separate yourself? How do you truly build a relationship with a potential customer? And one of the ways is you provide genuine value to them. So whether that, and there's a variety, I could go on for hours just on the topic of sales, but I've had a variety of guests do a variety of things. I had 2 great guests on who built a whole business around a Facebook group. All they did was create a Facebook group, go into other Facebook groups, post valuable content that people wanted more of, and then invited them to their own Facebook group. And that was essentially how they went from 0 to 5, it might have been even 6 figures, I think. They got 3,000 Facebook group members in 1 month. I couldn't believe it. I've actually re-listened to that episode myself because of how amazing I thought it was. I've had a sales guy on, all he does is sales. And he broke down a really cool way of finding your list of potential target market and then hitting them up in the best way possible. In his case, it's by phone. He's really good over the phone, can provide a lot of value, follow up with value by email, make sure you're checking in. So that's another, maybe my second point I'll say is sales is not a one-time thing in terms of it's not a one-touch point, right? So the famous saying is, you need between like 7 and 12 points of contact before you make a sale. That number is going to vary depending on what you're selling and how expensive it is. But I'll tell you, as someone in professional services where the fees are generally not low, it usually takes me at least 2 to 3 phone calls with especially a corporate client to have them sign a retainer. And that's usually with multiple back and forths over email as well. So keep in mind, if you're expecting to send a mass email or to send 1 or 2 Facebook messages and get sales, you're going to be in for a long, a bit of a struggle. Expect it to take 5 to 10 touch points. And once you kind of stomach that and work a strategy around that, things will flow more naturally. You won't be as frustrated. You'll have more of a system in place where instead of being frustrated, you'll just know what the next step is and you just do it. So number one is, what was my number one? My number one was kind of have the right strategy in place. Number 2 is know that it's going to take some touch points. And I really love sales. I talk about it a lot I have a daily vlog as well. So that's, as a solopreneur, I'm sure sales is just so important.
Correct. I'll often have new community members come in and I get them to track their time with Toggle. So just track your time, tell me where, and it's amazing. People saying I'm struggling. The most thing, I need more revenue. I need to double my revenue. I'm okay. But here's the obvious thing. You're only spending 5 hours a week on sales. You need to spend 15. And you need to spend 15 and you need to have a structure behind it like you've just articulated. So we've done some work recently on completely changing the game around LinkedIn. So, instead of being cold outreach, we've just come up with a brilliant format for doing it and it's getting amazing results. So, but you've got to spend that time. And that's where getting a VA, getting rid of things that aren't adding value to find that is so important. But that's the number one thing I see often with coaches and consultants. They just don't spend enough time selling and selling in the right way, which is, like you said, give first and then people will seek you rather than the other way around. So some brilliant advice there. I'll definitely put a summary of that in the show notes. And, you could have picked anyone to be an immigration lawyer for. How did you come about to pick tech companies that needed immigration or immigrants into Canada?
Yeah, I really think I was lucky, Paul, because it's just been the kind of perfect storm in where I am right now. So my friend who introduced me to his dad, who is the immigration lawyer I work with, suggested it to us because he works in the tech industry and said, you guys should take a look at this and evaluate it and then, do as you will. But it's the perfect storm for those who don't know much about the landscape in Canada. The tech scene is booming. And the immigration policies have never been friendlier for tech companies. And there's a lot of to add to that, there's a lot of turmoil going on in the US in those exact areas. So we know with Mr. Trump, he's not exactly interested in the friendliest immigration policies. And because of that, a lot of very skilled workers in the US are very concerned about their status in the country. So you have this perfect triage of opportunities with number one, the Canadian tech sector specifically is doing very well. Number two, the Canadian immigration policies have never been friendlier. Number three, the US has never, been, well, I mean, you could go back and forth on this, but it's not the most appealing place for tech workers to be right now. And all of those combine to kind of point us in that direction. Number four, it's also nice to work with corporate clients because, they have a longer or a larger long-term value because they can be repeat customers and they're typically more willing to write checks. It's a longer sales cycle, but a bigger customer value.
Brilliant. And look, as they say, all boats rise in a high tide. So I think you've definitely picked the right boat and tide to be in. So well done. And I think, I think luck is probably overstated. I think, you've been given an opportunity, you've assessed it well and jumped on it. So well done. As far as your business, what will your business look like in 3 years from now?
That's a really good question. I'm in the process of continuing to scale it up a little bit. And I say a little bit because until January, I was the only person working in it. So there's only so quickly you can grow it. But it was getting to the point where I was doing everything, literally everything. I don't like using the word literally, but I was literally doing everything. And when you're starting to bring in good amounts of revenue, it starts to become clear that there are certain tasks that should be outsourced because you can make more money by doing other things and outsourcing the quote unquote less skilled labor. So I was bringing in all these clients, which meant I had to draft their retainers and invoices and bills and all of that stuff, which anybody could do. And so it got to the point where I realized I need to bring on an assistant who can do all this stuff so that I can go out and spend my time making more sales or doing the billable work, which I'm billing for a lot more than what I'm paying a VA to do the admin work for. So I onboarded a VA part-time in January. It's gone really well. I've learned a lot. And I actually did a daily vlog this morning on my YouTube channel about kind of my findings after the first month of making my first hire and what it's like and the things to consider and keep in mind when you're making your first hire. Namely, that nobody else knows your business as well as you do, right? So when you bring someone in, you better be prepared to onboard them and give them the best chance of success. Otherwise, you're going to spend a lot of time managing them, which you don't want to do. So things have worked really well, and I'm slowly outsourcing more and more. And I have included a new service offering for my law firm, which is taking up more of my time. The goal, I guess, in the next year or two would be to eventually be bringing in so much business that I can hire someone to do the legal work that I don't want to do. So whether that be a lawyer, a paralegal, something like that, and I can keep my focus on the things I do enjoy and the things that drive the most revenue. So sales, marketing, all that fun type of stuff, networking, BD, and, just slowly growing the firm and keeping that dollars per hour worked in mind. So, you're outsourcing the low level stuff and you can scale the big level stuff.
Yeah, great. And, I think I say to all of my clients that there's three essentials. You need a mobile phone, you need a computer, And the third one is you need a VA. I just think it's so essential. And, you're another person that's validated how well they are. So we do training. I think what I often see, though, is that the VA is the easy part, to be honest, because I've normally done it for quite some time. I find that the business owner, as you said, getting it set up and getting that knowledge out of your head and handing over the processes, that's the hard work. So I train a lot of people on how to actually maximize a VA, because for some people, they've never done it before. So of course, it's going to be challenging. And, I ran a VA company myself for 5 years. So, I've worked with thousands of people on onboarding VAs. So got a lot of experience there, but I'm so glad that's working for you. As far as your biggest challenges at the moment, what are the things that, you're focusing on? What are the key things that are challenging you in your business today?
Yeah, I wouldn't say it's a huge challenge, but definitely the onboarding process, in my opinion, is definitely ongoing. So I'm trying to learn how to be the best boss I can be possible. Not necessarily boss. I don't like the boss employee relationship, but making my VA's job as easy as possible is definitely top of mind. Number two, which I think has always been top of mind, is time management and prioritizing. So, and this has been the case since day one when I was making no money, because one thing I kind of preach on a lot in all of my content is, as an entrepreneur, you wake up and your schedule is effectively a blank slate. Like we make schedules, right? Like we have a calendar, I have a to-do list, but I could do anything at any given time of the day. So the question then becomes, how are you most productive? Down to the almost minute, right, Paul? And you don't want to spend too much time worrying about that or getting nervous about it, because there is no, one of my daily vlogs I gave recently was a comparison to throwing a perfect game in baseball. You can't do it as an entrepreneur. You can't make every perfect decision, especially for years and years and every day in, day out. So how do I manage my time the most efficiently as possible? I would say is a big one and an ongoing one. And work-life balance and work side hustle balance have been top of mind as well. So I have my law firm. It's going well. I'm trying to grow it. And I have Soloprenuer Grind, which I really like doing. And not just because I learn a lot, but I'm hoping to help other people escape, just like you are, escape the 9-to-5 and be able to do what I do, which is work for myself, work my own hours, work where and when I want. And so how do I balance those two, right? Because Soloprenuer Grind, I don't have a product. I don't have a revenue from it yet. So how much time should I be putting towards that, considering my firm makes me, a decent amount of money? So I gotta, it's consistently time management, prioritizing, balancing, not just within my firm, but between the firm and Soloprenuer Grind. And that's why I love entrepreneurship, because there's no days off in terms of having to think about it, and try and improve.
Yeah, great. So before we go into the next section, I'd just like to say how I can help you as a listener. So I post daily actionable content and answer questions directly through direct message on LinkedIn. So just search for Build, Live, Give. You just type it in the top and connect with me. You'll see me as an employee. It's a lot easier than finding my name. And what I'd love you to do is just put in there in the personal connection. So I always recommend putting in a personal connection, not just accepting or connecting with someone, but put in there that you're a listener to the show. That would mean a lot to me. Excellent. So the next section is the live section. So what are some daily habits, Josh, that you haven't talked about so far that help you be successful?
Yeah, I have a morning routine that I think is very important. I have a Monday to Friday morning routine. Weekends, I take off the morning routine because I think I've earned it by then. But I think it's really important, not only how you start the day, but the night before. So I'll take a quick step back and say, the key to a great morning routine is an even better night routine. Because if you duff the night routine, you're going to find it much easier to want to skip the morning routine. So I would say number one is I make sure to get to bed at a reasonable time. And leading up to bed, I turn off the screens. So my laptop's off long before I go to bed because I need that time to relax. And I usually spend the last 30 to 60 minutes of my day reading a book, not on my phone, not on an e-reader or anything like that. I personally like the hardcovers. So I'm in bed at a decent time. I'm up at a decent time, and I'll just really quickly go through the morning routine. It's quite simple. I do 10 minutes of stretching. I spend a lot of time sitting down, in the office during the day. So I do 10 minutes of stretching. I do 10 minutes of meditation right after. I think that's a life changer, especially if you're someone like me, an overthinker, a mind racer. My mind's always racing, thinking, what do I do? Meditation's been so key. I do it for 10 minutes. I use an app called Insight Timer. It's free. There's some other ones I've tried. I like this one the best. And then I do about a 15 to 20 minute workout in my apartment. I have a pull-up bar, if you need some light weights and stuff, but I just do, 15 to 20 minutes of working out. And then I brush my teeth. I drink a big glass of water. And then I do my SG daily. So I put the coffee on and I do my 5 to 10 minute vlog in the morning, and then I start the day. And I think that's the key. That's the key, because that's why I'm able to work so efficiently throughout the day, work longer into the day, into the night if needed, and still be motivated and energized.
Excellent. Well, the next section is the give section. So what's a cause, a charity or a community that you're passionate about, and why?
Yeah, so I've been involved with UJA here in Toronto, Canada, United Jewish Appeal. I grew up in that community, in schools that supported me, and so I've been donating to them ever since I've been able to make enough money to donate, and I also volunteer as a fundraiser for their yearly fundraiser, as well as helping them in terms of giving back. I actually prefer to do rather than give.
Yes.
And the way I do that is through I help them organize events, especially back in my hometown, Ottawa. I helped chair a few casino nights for fundraising efforts and kind of community involvement, and that's something that's been a lot of fun and kind of keeps you connected to your roots.
Brilliant. Well, the last section is the action section, where I'll ask you some questions and get some rapid fire responses. So the first thing is, what are your top 3 productivity tips?
Number 1, keep a to-do list. 100%. If I didn't have my to-do list, I'd go crazy. Number 2, stay hydrated. Just drink water during the day. If you like drinking coffee, drink 1 cup of water for every cup of coffee, right? Half the time when we're hungry or grumpy or angry, we're actually just dehydrated. And number 3 is I take daily naps. I take 22-minute naps. Anything longer than 25, 30, and you wake up groggy. Anything shorter, and I find you don't get much of a rest. So I nap for about 20 to 24 minutes Monday to Friday.
Brilliant. And what are some of your favorite apps or software that you recommend?
Well, Insight Timer, like I mentioned, definitely for meditation. To be honest, Paul, I don't use that much. I use Google Forms a lot for my business because it helps me do a lot of client intake. So if you do have a lot of interactions with your clients and you're looking to reduce that time, then I would say use Google Drive and all of its functions to the maximum. And the one other thing I'll say is, if you're heavily reliant on email, is I use what's called canned responses, and it's free in Gmail. You can just go into the settings. I think it's like under advanced or something, and turn it on, and you can effectively save templates if you're sending the same email over and over again. My business is heavily reliant on email, and that's probably saved me days of typing.
Great. Well, as you mentioned before, you're an avid reader. You also listen to a lot of podcasts, but just give us a couple of books and a couple of podcasts that you recommend.
Yeah, I'd say books. Jay Abraham's Getting Everything You Can Out of All You've Got is one of the better books, business books I've read, because it's so, like, the way he puts it is just, it's so simple and logical and makes so much sense, but a lot of it is overlooked. It's a lot of the basics. If you get that stuff right, I think you could do well in any business. Another book, a recent one, I read Richard Branson's biography, one of his first ones. He has multiple biographies. I forget which one it was. They're probably all amazing, but Richard Branson's story about how he got started and just kind of figured it all out on the fly will give you a ton of motivation.
Yeah, losing my virginity. I loved that one.
Yes.
So I think that was his
Yes.
first one.
I think that's it. Yes. That
Yep.
sounds familiar. And in terms of podcasts, I'm going a little off topic here, but my favorite podcast is Bill Burr's Monday Morning Podcast. He's a comedian. Sometimes when I listen to podcasts, I just need to reset and unwind. And I think he's the funniest guy in the world. And Tim Ferriss, he's a great podcast host. He has amazing guests that very few people could get on. He asks very intriguing questions, and it covers all aspects of not just business, but life, health, wealth, all of that stuff, which is so important, especially if you're a solopreneur, because you spend so much time working by yourself, for yourself, with yourself. If you're not looking after the physical and the mental side, I think you might have a tough time. So I would make that a priority too.
Great. And last question is, what's the impact you want to leave on the world?
Whew, ending with a bang. I want to help as many people as I can be able to enjoy their career like I have so far. So I'm happy every day because I can wake up on my own terms and build something of my own. And I know that there are a lot of people out there who aren't so lucky yet. So if I can show those people that it is possible and hopefully help them to get there, then I'd be pretty satisfied and raise a happy, healthy family. But that's probably a few years down the line.
Great. Well, look, it's been so fantastic having you on the show, Josh. I love being on your show. So listeners can go and find that at Soloprenuer Grind. And, this show has been excellent. And I know you've kindly given us a great value add. So, your top 3 tips that you would give to yourself if you're going to start again. I think that's a great thing to have. It's always best to, learn from people that have gone before you. So you can go to solopreneurgrind.com/join. That and everything else Josh has mentioned will be in the show notes as well. So Josh, thanks a lot for coming on and sharing your wisdom today.
Paul, thanks for having me. It's always a pleasure to chat.
Brilliant. Thanks, Josh. Bye. I really enjoyed that show with Josh. He's such an insightful guy. So what are my top 3 takeouts? 1 is continual education. 2 is focus on sales. And 3 is pick the right industry. You can get all the show notes at buildlivegive.com/podcast and just search for Josh. And also what I'd love you to do is connect with me on LinkedIn. So just go to Build Live Give, find my name, and let me know that you're a listener. That's how you found me. Personalize the invitation. Lastly, please take action and live with freedom.
Thank you for listening to the Corporate Escapees podcast, brought to you by Build, Live, Give. If you would like to join a community of like-minded peers, please visit www.buildlivegive.com. Until next time, thanks for listening and be brave.